Hello and welcome to the eighth installment of Kalam Digest, our weekly news summary, recording today on the 1st of October 2024. It's been almost a year of war since the 7th of October last year, and the past week has been extremely dramatic with escalations in Lebanon, notably the Secretary General, which is his official title. We just Googled that, of Hezbollah, Hassan Nasrallah, was assassinated when Israel struck an apartment complex in southern Beirut, killing scores of civilians in the attack as well. Um, this is one of the most dramatic assassinations Israel has ever carried out, the reverberations of which will be felt probably for, I mean, if not years, decades, maybe even generations.
Mm.
Before we get into all that, I'd like to welcome my partner in crime, Sam Carlson, to the show. Welcome.
Thank you, Edgar.
Before we get into Lebanon, I should mention also that last night the ground invasion began. Israeli troops are now in southern Lebanon, conducting a small scale, at the moment, ground invasion, it seems, but it's likely to escalate in size. But before we get into Lebanon, let's just mention some other pieces of news. While the Israeli army is invading southern Lebanon, it continues its sort of invasions, sort of temporary invasions or
Mm.
incursions or raids in the West Bank. So the Balata refugee camp outside of Nablus was fell victim to one of these raids just the other day. Sam, what happened there?
I mean, as you said, it's part of an ongoing pattern where Israel invades areas in the West Bank, which are perceived, and probably rightly so, to be centers of the resistance against Israel. Balata is one of those. Same thing with Tulkarem and some other locales in the West Bank. This was ongoing overnight. The last I heard was just one dead, but might be, of course, much more. But this is mostly just to point out that the repression and the attacks and the, let's call it a war, which it is, in the West Bank is ongoing. Just as we focus on Lebanon for obvious reasons, it doesn't mean that Israeli attacks on the West Bank or on Gaza, of course, have been or will be diminishing or decreasing most surely.
Yeah, and sort of in related news, as you say this, the airstrikes on Gaza are not have not ceased at all. Um, the what are the latest figures in terms of casualties from Israeli airstrikes in Gaza?
The last I heard from yesterday was 12 killed in an airstrike on a school, and at least seven killed overnight in an airstrike in Gaza. So, it's hard even to keep track of how many people are killed ongoing. It's just the numbers keep adding.
And was
And
that
that's
was that from
particularly
the last
what's
24 hours?
yeah, seven is from the last 24 hours, and a dozen was from the day before. This is what I've just gleaned recently.
Yeah, it's important to remember as we go into our main story. So, Israeli troops in southern Lebanon, reminiscent of 2006, but maybe even more reminiscent of 1982, when Israel invaded all of southern Lebanon, all the way up to southern Beirut. This time, it seems maybe they have a different strategy, a different plan in terms of where they invade from, etc. But it's all quite hard to grasp the sort of military strategic aspect of it all because of, military censorship in Israel.
Yeah.
But if we start somehow with the death of Nasrallah, which I think was the biggest piece of news last week, or maybe even all year, to be honest.
Yeah.
What's your take on his death, Sam? I mean, first, how do you have any idea of how they managed to do it?
I mean, it seems as we talked about last week that this is probably connected somehow to the strikes on the pagers because it helped them reveal a lot of the locations for leadership in Hezbollah. So I would guess that it's probably part of the same kind of let's say surveillance operation. But exactly how they managed to do it is beyond my knowledge. But as many people have pointed out, this is a huge blow against Hezbollah, partly just because, let's say, if we look at Hamas, for example, they have, of course, they have the leadership is important, and the leaders are, usually influential persons, but they have much more of a collective leadership strategy historically, mostly because, or to a large extent, because they know that their leaders will be getting killed all the time. They're used to that. And of course, Hezbollah leaders are also murdered or killed in combat, so it's nothing new per se, but they have not been used to this kind of targeted assassinations of their top leadership. So I would say this is a huge blow. Just that Hassan Nasrallah an immensely important person, or was, for Hezbollah and for regional politics. He was one of the people who founded Hezbollah back in the 80s. So this is not just some a third generation current leader or something. This is a major person in the history of the organization per se, and also, of course, because it shows the world how weakened they've been by the last couple of weeks, the attacks. This isn't supposed to be possible, even though everyone knows Israel has a very strong security and surveillance apparatus. Being able to just find his location and strike him is impressive, might be the wrong word, but it's shocking. It's something that
It's shocking.
Allah
Yeah.
is it's also a proof that they are weakened and they are very vulnerable at the moment.
Yeah, of course.
That's important to
Shock.
remember.
Shock and awe is definitely a term that comes to mind. Should we say something about what Hassan Nasrallah means to countless Lebanese people and beyond? I mean, no matter, let's point out that the West considers him, many Western countries consider him a terrorist or the leader of a terrorist organization. For many Lebanese people, he is kind of a protector. I mean, for many Shias, many people in the South, he's been the one who's protected them and built up entire neighborhoods after bombings by Israel in 2006
Yeah.
specifically, and he has been kind of crowned the liberator of Southern Lebanon, and much of the when Israel retreated from Southern Lebanon in 2000, in the year 2000,
Mm,
a lot of that was attributed to him and his sort of guerrilla style resistance. But
absolutely.
beyond, but
Rightly so,
beyond,
I would say. I mean, it's
rightly so,
something
sure.
they would not have wanted to do. Yeah.
Yeah, but beyond like military, strategic, technical stuff, what do you think he's his kind of person means to the people of Southern Lebanon?
I mean, so we have to talk about Nasrallah from many different perspectives. One perspective, of course, is a lot of people also hate him, despise him, and I
Yeah,
mean, it's huge parts of even of Lebanese society would consider him to be like an enemy of the state almost.
yeah,
Specifically, Christian conservatives or pseudo proto-fascist movements like Kataib, etc. But also, I think more like a lot of more moderate conservative or liberal people would say that the organization that he's built up, Hezbollah, is a threat to the stability of Lebanon, and it hinders the development of a modern functioning state. Let's say.
yeah,
Let's not go into a discussion about that. I think we were going to make a Kalam Shorts episode specifically on the history of sectarianism in Lebanon,
yeah,
but just suffice to say that he's not generally embraced by Lebanese people or by people around the region. But for Shia Muslims generally, and specifically in Lebanon, he's a hugely influential figure. Not that even, of course, all of them necessarily sympathize with Hezbollah politically or with Islamism, but he is part of that generation which built up kind of the Shia sect or the Shia ethnic group in Lebanon as an independent force, which was to be reckoned with and which finally basically got its due in terms of influence over the state and economic opportunities, etc. I mean, still today, the Shiites are probably the most economically, let's say, vulnerable group in Lebanon. But as you said, he's built up. I mean, not him, but Hezbollah and Amal and etc. The Shiites political organizations have built up much more of a social security net, a social kind of
yeah.
structure to support ordinary Shia working class people. And this, of course, gives them an importance and gives him a symbolic importance far beyond the reach of like let's say the narrow idea of Hezbollah as other terrorist organization that hates Israel.
Yeah,
In the West, you would normally only hear about them in that context. It
yeah,
is a state within a state to a certain extent, and for many Shiites, it's rightly so.
sure.
The sectarian system means that uh, having a state within a state is kind of part of what it means to be a strong group inside the Lebanese state structure. And for many Shiites, Hezbollah was the party that managed to achieve that for them.
Yeah, and I think we shouldn't either underestimate the cultural, religious significance of him as a figure.
Yeah,
When I've been seeing videos in southern Beirut and other parts of other Shia strongholds in Lebanon where people uh, as they found out that he had been killed, went out and wept in the streets,
yeah,
in spontaneous kind of expressions of sorrow. And not for a second do I think that this is staged. It's not
not at
North
all.
Korea. I think it's quite genuine because the shock is so huge because it's like murdering a president.
Absolutely, yeah,
It's
it's
on par with that.
violent.
I don't think there may be three other political figures in Lebanon today of whose murder might incur the same kind of reaction. But probably he would incur
I
the
would say
most.
no one comes close, actually. I would
Yeah,
say, I
probably,
mean,
yeah.
yeah,
But I mean, if if Jaja was murdered, or if Aoun was murdered for the Christians, what that would mean. But I think Nasrallah
absolutely,
even more. I think
even more so.
honestly, in beyond his own community. Then we should also and yeah,
Absolutely, as you said, it's important to point out that basically every sect in Lebanon, every religious ethnic group has this kind of some kind of leadership figure.
yeah,
You have you have like the Druze have their family and their leading figures. But I mean the Jumlats. I mean
yeah,
if Jumlat was murdered, of course the Druze would be a huge uproar.
yeah,
But I would say, as we just talked about, the thing with Nasrallah is he has that position within his own, his own ethnic group, but he also has this huge, I mean, this much bigger symbolism of being like the first leader who managed to give them kind of that, uh, you know, kind of gave them their due position within society. The
yeah,
other people are more like leaders, of historical sects or nations within the nations. Let's say he's also kind of a revolutionary hero somehow.
yeah.
He brought the Shiites from a marginalized position into kind of a position of power and importance.
Power broker
And
and
also, I mean, let's not forget, I mean, within the Shiite, I mean, theological, tradition, there's also this huge emphasis on martyrdom and the
yeah,
martyrdom of Hassan Hussein, etc. So you have this
Imam
historical
Ali.
precedent of exactly you have this historical precedent of your leaders getting killed. It's a
Yeah,
very symbolic, important thing, and
yeah.
every time it happens, it's something that gains um, it puts it in an extra
Yeah,
important.
I mean, the amount of videos I've seen, which a friend of the show, Ralph Baidoun, has sent me,
Yeah,
of young Shiais going, like sort of influential Shiais going on social media saying, you know what, the Sayyid is not dead.
yeah,
And I don't say, and it's kind of, it's not actually funny because
yeah,
a lot of people will believe it. It's it really blew my mind seeing that a lot of people are saying, quoting Quranic verses or quoting, things he's said in past speeches. They're like, don't believe everything you see. Of
yeah.
course, he's not dead. How could he be? Giving people false hope. But really, what's
He's in
happening
ghaib, and he's in occultation, like
exactly? What is he, the
something like
Messiah
that.
now? I mean, it's ridiculous. Come on. But
Yeah, of course.
I think Hezbollah has been dealt such a serious blow that it seems. I mean, it's its head has been cut off, and its top leader because it's not just Nasrallah, its top leadership has
Yep.
been eliminated completely. And so let's get into the regional aspect. Syria and Iran left the chat a long time ago. What the
I
hell
think so.
happened?
Yeah.
How
Yep.
how is it possible that has because okay, and before we get into that, sorry, many tangents. We should mention because we've been speaking quite positively in a way about Nasrallah. Nasrallah, without Nasrallah and Hezbollah, Bashar al-Assad would have been toppled. We don't know if Syria
Of
would have
course.
been worse off. I can't imagine how it would be, but Hezbollah saved the butcher of Syria, Bashar al-Assad, and for that reason as well,
Yeah,
despised not just by his ideological and religious opponents. He's despised by anyone, who's a fan of a free Syria or who supports sort of
yeah,
human rights in that country. But
absolutely.
his old buddy, Bashar al-Assad, did not lift a finger when Israel started attacking Lebanon, and neither did Iran.
Yeah.
Um, why is that?
Uh, 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 these are very, very complicated and difficult questions, of course. I would say for Iran, I'm not so sure if they're still in some kind of, they're doing some, of course, there are contacts between Iran and the US. There might be that the US has just said, if you do anything, we'll kill you, I mean, and they know that they have
Yeah.
the capability to do that, to strike, immensely at Iran directly. It might be that they're just keeping out of the conflict. With Syria, I would say, the Assad tradition is to, you know, uh, you leave your allies behind, the minute it suits you. Thing with with the Palestinian movement in Jordan in 1970.
Yeah.
Black September, the whole Assad thing was, we're going to protect you, we're going to, support, prop up your position, the PLO, and
And
the
that was
minute
the father of that was Hafiz.
that was Hafiz. Yeah, of course, it was the father of the current Assad. But
Yeah.
the idea of letting down your allies is a very strong tradition, and in that kind of uh, I mean, incredibly pragmatic Arab nationalist
Yeah.
tradition. Same thing with the invasions. You can't call them anything else, of Lebanon in the 70s. They were supposedly done, to keep the peace or something like that, but they were basically done to strike at the Lebanese left, because the Lebanese left was so obviously going to win the war in Lebanon.
The Syrian
And
invasion.
the Syrian invasion, the Syrians invaded Lebanon to make sure that their supposed allies, the Lebanese left and the Palestinians, did not win the war, because they knew that if they won the war, there would be an all-out confrontation with Israel, and
Yeah.
Syria didn't want that.
Which is
So,
a crazy thing, like, I mean, this is the kind of regime that, I'm sorry, but Hassan Nasrallah has propped up.
mm.
Um,
But I'm not. I mean, let's say I'm not surprised that Assad would let them down the minute that
yeah.
it's a good idea for them. On the other hand, we don't know. I mean, they might be trying to support them somehow. They might be trying to smuggle in forces. They might have a contingency plan, which is basically to retreat and, to do a guerrilla warfare all out. I would say, like, but I would say I'm not surprised that Syria doesn't actually do anything. They've been not doing anything, remotely Assad in power. Um, you know,
Yeah.
um, doing that using the excuse of them being kind of part of the axis of resistance or something like that, being like, this is not going to be friends of the Palestinian anytime soon, in any way.
Yeah. I mean,
But I mean, for Iran, I say it's still hard to know. Is there kind of do they have a long-term plan, or are they just kind of trying to extricate themselves from the situation? I'm not sure. But let's just be clear that if they would just drop Hezbollah, that would be a huge shift in the power balance of the entire region. Um, this been like the basic, as we talked about, I think 2 episodes back, the idea that this is kind of a nuclear terror balance of
yeah,
mutually
yeah, yeah.
assured destruction
Deterrent.
situation.
Yeah.
Deterrent, yeah, where like Iran has been able to use Hezbollah as, they know that they couldn't destroy Israel or anything like that, but they've been, they know that they can strike back if people try to mess with their internal affairs. They can strike back. If they would just drop that, I'm not sure what that would mean um, for the balance of forces in the region.
Yeah.
It would also be very surprising to me, actually, if they would just give up on Hezbollah. I would rather, my guess would be that they have some kind of idea about how to um, work this out going forward. Not saying that it's gonna work
Yeah.
well for them, but saying that they're not just, leaving the situation behind. I don't think they're doing that. That would
Yeah.
be
But I mean, in the
radical.
in the short term, we can sort of make the statement that Iran and Syria have completely abandoned their most important ally in Lebanon.
Seems so, yeah. It seems so. Um,
But okay, so should we say something about the invasion itself? What do we know? What Israel has sent ground troops into southern Lebanon after large airstrikes all over the country,
yeah.
and intensive artillery shelling of supposed alleged Hezbollah positions, I guess. What do we know?
Yeah, well, we don't know much, as we just said. We know that they are. It's been even been like conflicting reports on whether or not the ground invasion has actually started, the all-out ground invasion. But it seems probable that it has this late yesterday evening or night. We should also note that they have been conducting some kind of reconnaissance, something like that, operations inside Lebanon for a couple of days. Probably, it seems probable at least, and there's been some fighting already between the Hezbollah kind of elite troops and invading smaller groups of Israeli soldiers infiltrating Lebanon. But
Yeah,
what we know, as you said, we know that they've been bombing all over the country, mostly the Bekaa Valley and in Jabal Amel in the south. But we also know they've been striking central Beirut now, which is, Dahia is the southern suburbs. It's obviously part of Beirut. It's nothing, it's just part of the city, but it's so clearly identified as a Shia part of the city that it's kind of considered to be different if they bomb Dahia or if they bomb the rest of Beirut.
yeah.
So it seems they're striking even close to Hamra Street now, like in the westernmost.
Yeah, they struck a roundabout
Oh, the
or
Kola roundabout. Yeah.
Kola roundabout, which it's called, and that was to eliminate, which they did, three fighters or commanders within the PFLP, which
Oh,
is
really? Hmm.
which is not Hezbollah, and the Israelis confirmed that they got them, or that they
Oh, really?
assassinated them. And the PFLP, as we know, is the Palestinian Front for the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, the Jabha, and they're Marxist-Leninist
Yep.
organization. They're very not much not
Left wing, very
although
much not a.
they're pragmatically right now they're fighting alongside Islamist
Of course.
organizations, but
But in the
to
80s, they were
say
killing each other outright,
exactly
having
in
a
Lebanon,
civil war basically in
famously.
Lebanon. But of
But
course, the PFLP is strong, and the DFLP are strong within the camps, the Palestinian refugee camps in Beirut and around Lebanon. So it
yeah,
would make
but just
sense
to
that they're
say that
also trying to strike at Palestinian organizations inside Lebanon as well.
yeah, but I mean, when Israel says that they're waging a war against Hezbollah, they, fail to,
They're
uh,
waging war on anyone they don't like in Lebanon,
yeah, let's say that, and
basically.
let's be real, against civilians. But it's interesting
Of
when you
course.
said, I mean, when you said it's hard to know whether the ground invasion has begun or not.
Mm.
It reminds me of when we were thinking about, or when we were anticipating the ground invasion of Rafah, and
Yeah.
because that was such a red line for Biden, and this is obviously not I mean excuse the pun, not exactly kosher in terms of the international
Yeah,
community, I can say that. But this invasion of Lebanon, so I think it's in Israel's best interest to keep us a bit confused
I
about,
think
like,
so as
has
well.
it
Yeah.
begun, has it not begun? And that is why several news organizations in Sweden and across the world have not used the word invasion, and they're using the word, ground operation, or limited raids, limited, something like that. And it just, if we do a small media critical segment in this episode, I mean, why not say the same thing about Putin? Uh,
It's comical how similar it is to Putin uses the word, no, it's not a war, it's a special military operation.
yeah,
And this is like the West just goes along with it. Like, okay, so the war hasn't started. It's just a special military movement going
yeah.
on. It's like, why would you
Like,
use this? It's a war. Everyone
why
knows this.
you might as well, read from from an IDF press release. Why
Yeah.
use your own brain at all? That's ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean, just the parallels, as you said, the parallels to Ukraine is they're so glaringly obvious. You would think as a journalist, you would be kind of embarrassed when you're like, oh, I'm gonna write that this is a limited military
It's
movement.
ridiculous. Because
It's like, why would you do that? You know how this looks to anyone who
yeah,
can read.
exactly, exactly. And I think, I mean, the insistence from most Western media organizations, and rightly so, to every
Mm,
time you mention what Russia is doing in Ukraine, you say
yeah,
full-scale invasion. You have to say those three
yeah.
words, otherwise you will be
War of
ostracized.
aggression. You have to
Exactly.
use these phrases,
Yeah.
right?
And rightly so. I think we
Yeah,
should
of
do
course,
that,
of course.
because
Yeah,
I think a lot of people do fall into the trap of kind of becoming a tanky in the situations when you're
yeah,
like, well, okay, if you're not going to call that like an invasion, then I won't call Russia, like a tit for tat
yeah,
kind of thing. No, they're both fucking invasions, and
yeah.
they're
Of
both
course,
breaking international law, and they're both
absolutely.
killing scores of civilians when things could be resolved on the negotiating table.
Absolutely. I mean, yeah, it's just yeah, why as a leftist or like any kind of progressive person would draw the conclusion that since Israel gets away with this, I should let
Yeah.
Russia get away with whatever they're doing. I have no clue, but this is a strong tradition in the US specifically being like, oh, the US is for something, I have to be against it.
Yeah,
And
yeah, yeah. It's
I don't know, but yeah, makes no sense to me. So let's just leave that behind. But yeah, I mean the extent to which Western media are just going along with whatever the Israeli occupation forces use, as their their preferred nomenclature. It's
yeah.
insane. I can't
It's
it's
that.
not it's not about politics per se. It's about as a journalist, I
Yeah,
wouldn't really care about the politics of it. I would just be this is embarrassing to me
exactly.
as a journalist. Like
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
everyone sees through this.
I mean, it's a matter
Um,
of integrity, isn't it?
exactly. That's what I'm
Press
trying to say.
ethics, integrity. Well,
You need to have some kind of self-respect, if you're going to work on a serious news agency. It's
I mean, as
clearly not.
I mean, you do say that, and I mean, separate from all these issues, I think we journalists do have to have. I mean, I said this the other day when someone was asking me about journalism and just in general. I said it's what's it called? It's a profession where you have to have at the very same time the most
Mm,
amount of personal integrity and the
mm.
least amount of personal integrity. Because you have to do
I
things
think.
in this job that are like, if you're working in parliament, for example, you have to, run around. They call them parliament rats in
Yeah.
Swedish slang. You have to run around and try to get like a comment from someone, almost like physically harass people. And
Yeah.
if you're a foreign correspondent or reporting on foreign countries that are, people in Lebanon right now, people, you might not get a lot of sleep. You might be sleeping on mattresses in some weird apartment, just to get at
Mm.
the story. So, I would say it's kind of a combination. But if you're sitting in a fucking newsroom, in Stockholm, with, a warm cup of coffee and all of the comforts of Western
Yeah.
life, then I think that the integrity that you search for, is it's right in front of you. You just have to
Yep.
grab it. Anyway, with those
That's a
words, should we?
piece of advice for our colleagues out there, or
Yeah.
your colleagues, I would say. I'm not a
If
journalist,
anyone's
never been,
listening.
never been. Yeah, exactly.
Um, yeah, it's and
But
again,
yes, I mean so yeah. So
it's
let's
not
just
about
say that we
individual
know that there's
ego.
a ground invasion going on. It's
Yeah,
somehow creepingly moving forward, and so we have to see over time now is it going to be an all-out attack? Israel has been saying before, we consider our northern border to be the Litani River, which would mean basically taking over a third of Lebanon.
annexation.
Applying that permanently, I would say that's not so probable, but also if they just make a very temporary kind of limited incursion, that's not going to solve their issues. I mean, Hezbollah is going
Yeah,
to be back in a couple of days, and
yeah,
so they still have they have an immense pressure, domestic political pressure inside
sure.
Israel. There's hundreds of thousands of people who have been displaced from the north,
Yeah,
and they're still formally speaking a democratic country in the sense that they have to somehow care about public
yeah,
opinion, regardless of how degenerated their institutions are. So I would say it's they have to solve this issue. It's actually something
yeah,
that is pressing the government as well. They have to deal with this. They can't just let it be ongoing for forever.
yeah,
So I mean, right now it looks, based on what we just said about Hezbollah being severely weakened at the time, it might seem that situation looks really good for Israel, but I would say over time, I still have
I
a
would
very
say,
hard
yeah,
time seeing
long term the
how
situation's
are they
gonna
going to
change.
achieve their goals
Yeah,
without getting bogged down in a horrible, horrible guerrilla war in Lebanon, which that is something they cannot win.
Yeah,
They
I
can
mean,
say that
look, I
it's just
think,
possible.
look, we should wrap this because we've gone on for a while, but I
Yeah,
think we've seen this before.
yeah.
In Vietnam, two major powers tried to do that. In
Mm.
Iraq, in Afghanistan. I mean, we all know, we know how this story ends. So,
It
uh,
doesn't end well for whoever's trying to
exactly.
do pacification.
Yeah. With that,
Um,
thank you everyone for tuning in to the eighth installment of Kalam Digest, and thank you, Sam, for joining me.
and thank you, Edgar. Bye.
Bye.